Okay, here we are. This is something that I wanted to do because I want Canada and hopefully the world, thanks to the internet, know who you are. I'm born and raised from Peterborough. So are you, Peggy. We know our families go back a long time, but you've really dedicated your life to advocacy, mental health, and addiction. You created Redpath in 2002, and you've been able to really treat why people are addicted. I would like to say that you have seen this crisis coming to this volcanic eruptive part that we are experiencing right now. Both of us being from Peterborough, I have never seen Peterborough in the state that it is in right now. I'm assuming you also have never seen it like this.
Yeah, I think the whole world is suffering right now. It's coming out of big pharma. It's coming out, we could go on and on for many reels on where it's coming from. That's not gonna really do much. But I think what is happening, I would call it a cesspool. I wouldn't even go as high as a volcano, that it just becomes getting larger and larger at the ground level. And we need to do something about it. I watched a section, and I don't even know what took me to a film recently of Patch Adams, and they're in the psychiatric hospital, and he says, how many fingers are up? And he says 4, and the fellow says, how many do you see? You're so concentrated on the problem that you can't even look at the solution, sort of thing. And I think that's where we are, is the focus has been so much on the problem. And I think that's where we come in. Our focus is on the solution. And so,
why do you do this? This is hard. This is hard what you do. It is not secure funding. It is a struggle every day. You are surrounded by suffering. You are surrounded by death, quite frankly. People who don't make it. You've been in and out of jails. You've seen what most people can't even imagine or only watched on movies. Why are you still doing this?
Well, I came from poverty myself. My father died when I was younger. My mother ran off on him. My mother's brother was on the streets at that time, was called a wino. He lived under the bridge down by the Holiday Inn. So I was exposed to that. I remember seeing him on a bench with, the brown bag and the bottle in it. He didn't even know me. He was my uncle. So I think when you're surrounded by alcohol, I come from a family of immigrants from Ireland that their trauma was drinking in those days. And so I think that when you're surrounded by it, and I think you love people, and you know that all people are good somewhere, that I think that we have to keep going. I have 8 grandchildren coming behind me. It's my responsibility as a grandmother to make sure that I can do the best I can in our community so that their lives will be better after I go. So I think that's why I do it. I do it because I love people. And I think that I've created something that is a piece of the solution. So I will keep pushing for it, because I've seen around Canada, and even as far as Guam, the success of our program.
Peggy, we have a deep divide that it's like the visual I have, it's like a crater. It's like, you're watching that Hollywood movie, and it's like an earthquake, and it divides, and the earth's separate, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And on one side of that is you have people who are saying, we have to give more safe supply. We have to meet people where they are at and give them what they need, which in their minds is safe supply. I see you on the other side of that crater of saying, we can meet people where they're at, but we can help them get out of where they're at. And I feel like I've never seen it so polarized before. And Peterborough was a pilot project under the federal government for safe supply. And that means that they were given funding for 41 participants in hopes to just keep them alive. And the idea is to give them safe supply, which is a prescription drug, which then they're to go to a pharmacist and take it and hopefully level out. This has created massive division because of where the money is going. You're not getting that money here at Right to Heal. The money is going to these pilot projects. When I asked the organizers of this program, I said, if I gave you a magic wand and all the money in the world, what would you do to help the addiction crisis? And their answer was regulate fentanyl. For somebody who's worked in addiction and mental health as long as you have and seen the success that you have, how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as regulating fentanyl because fentanyl isn't even a drug to regulate. Fentanyl, what we're seeing on the street right now, is an illegal drug coming out of China that is not even requiring farmers' fields anymore of an opiate. And I'm not even sure why it's called fentanyl because it isn't coming off of the poppy plant. It is true chemicals, and somebody somewhere along the line coined it fentanyl. The only liquid fentanyl that you can get is in a hospital, mainly in an operating room. So you could never regulate something that doesn't exist. The only drug that does exist that's equivalent or not even equivalent to the chemical drugs that are on our streets right now, nothing that we produce can ever be that strong. What we used to call when I was a nurse is Dilaudid is now called hydromorphone, which is what is being used as a safe supply. Dilaudid was never produced to be injected. Dilaudid is a narcotic that you take by mouth, and when I was in nursing, you would get 1 pill every 6 hours. After probably an operation that wasn't just your toenails off. And so the drug that is currently being used as what one considers safe supply, people are injecting. There's fillers in hydromorphone, and that's why it isn't a pill to be injected. Well, most pills aren't pills to be injected. If you go back to when opiates started in Percocets and Percodan, they were so chalky you couldn't inject them. So we didn't have that problem back then. Back then it was heroin. And so now Dilaudids, when you get safe supply, if you're not selling them and you're using them, I think, I don't work there, so I don't know what people are being told, but I know that there is research out there that's showing that those fillers or fibers or whatever that are in those pills are somehow in certain people being lodged in the spine, which is then causing a severe infection and people are dying. And so I think the problem with research is you have this group of people writing research that this is saving lives, and then you have people on this side that is producing research that is saying it's not saving lives. But I don't know where that research is. When I read something in the Globe or the Star or the Sun or wherever the paper is, and I, as somebody that is just in the process of completing my PhD, and I would consider myself a scholar in the area of addictions, I have written journalists in the past asking them, are these papers that you're referring to, and never get a call back. And so I'd like to know where these papers that people are citing are, so that us as research can tear it apart and question them. And so when people say there's research on either side of the spectrum, I'd like to see the papers as a researcher.
And the other thing I would push on that is who funded that research.
Yeah, and did they do it themselves, which often is the case. So, right. I mean, but still you can look at the population that was surveyed. You can look at what was the qualifications of the people collecting the survey, how were they trained, like that, like, so there's many, many questions surrounding it. If I took your research and repeated it, am I getting the same findings? And I should. That's why that research at a scholarly level, that's what you have to do, that you have to make sure all of these things are in order if somebody comes along and repeats the research.
What do you do at Right to Heal? What is your goal here, and how do you help people?
So we were funded by the Ontario government. It was the first time in our whole time in 20 some years that a government has had faith in us in order to fund us. Minister Tabolo, he saw the results of some of our work, our Red Path programs elsewhere in the province, and sort of seeked me out. We had a meeting in regards to another project, and as a result, Dave Smith our local MPP, really fought hard for approximately 4 years for us to get funding. And still there was many hurdles along the way, and still hurdles to this day on being granted funding, but the Ontario Health giving us the funding, and it becomes very, very difficult sometimes. But what we do here is for those that are wanting to change their lives or at least attempt to come in our doors, have a coffee. We do an assessment. I developed a 102 question survey through the Emotion Health Lab at Trent University with Dr. James Parker. And we created a scale, an assessment scale, and we look at where people are having the most difficulty. We've added to it an optimistic scale so that we can see if you even think you have a future. And if you don't, you might need some one-on-ones before you even go into programming. And then we do programming. And many people go through the program more than once, and they continue being part of here. So we find ourselves growing in numbers as a result of that. And we get referrals from the Patsy Clinic, which is the mental health floor at the hospital. We have in the past been referred with Elizabeth Fry, and there's a few other places, but often it's self-referral.
Peggy, we talked at the beginning of this interview about the streets in Peterborough and the homelessness and the suffering that is happening. Do you think we can change the direction that we are headed in Peterborough? Businesses are suffering. Families can't come downtown. The people who are using are in depths of despair. The families of the people who are using are in the depths of despair. Can we reverse this?
Well, we definitely can, or you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. I'd probably be at home swimming in my pool. I think that right now we're seeing desperation. We've been robbed in our building here twice in the last month. The things that they collected, and some were left behind in bags because I think they were scared off, were things that you and I would never even think about taking if we're going to rob somewhere, and that had no real money value. And so I think people are just so desperate that when you get to that state, but I think that the narrative has to change. I think, just like crises, like all of these things, we have to change the narrative. And nothing, I'm not just talking here about stigma, because I think we have to be very careful in how we start using semantics. And so I think that everyone says, well, everywhere is like that now. Yeah, everywhere is like that. And so where do we start? We start with changing the narrative. So just like we need to shut everything down, well then, if we shut everything down in our city right now, we would be in chaos for sure, because we have all these withdrawals, we have all of these things. So everything that we do in our country right now has to be done in a way that everybody is safe to a certain extent. I can't take somebody right off of all of opioids and think that they're going to be okay, because they're not going to be okay. They're going to get really, really sick, and that's why they're using the opioids. People aren't addicts because they want to be addicts. When you get to that stage in your life that you're an addict, you're seeking the drug or whatever you're taking in order not to be sick. It has nothing to do with, woohoo, I'm going to feel great today. It's, I don't want to be sick. And so if we shut everything down that got started, we're in bigger trouble than by keeping them open, because we have nothing in place right now for the deaths that could occur as a result of depending on what they're taking, or the facilities and that to hold all the people for treatment. Our jails, Central East right now is, they say 4 to a cell. So crimes are up, but they're not being recorded for some reason. But so we've got jails full, and we have encampments, and we have injection sites, and we have all of these things. But we keep focusing in on that. The camera is focusing in on the needle on the ground. The camera's focusing on Buddy's butt crack showing over there, passed out in a park. But nowhere are we talking about coming together around the table and say we need to find real solutions, because it isn't fair that that woman is walking downtown without her pants on. Because you know what, 20 years ago, she would be put into a mental hospital and she would get help. That's not ethical. What's ethical? That isn't. And that isn't ethical, seeing all these people in desperation with needles hanging out of their arms on George Street. Or, a teenage kid prostituting because they need more crack. Like, that isn't ethical. And so we need to sit at the table and figure out how are we going to create more solutions for the problems that continue getting bigger and bigger.
I think what sets you apart, Peggy, whether you see it or not, this is how I see you, is you really believe in consequences too. Like, there's this line, and it is very challenging in this space between enabling and empowering. It's a very, very delicate line. How do you walk that? As I've seen you with people, right? Like you don't take BS from anybody, but you're compassionate, because what I see is that you believe people are capable of better if given the right tools.
Oh, for sure. Now, if Liz was sitting beside me right now, she would caution you that I have a few trigger words, and the hair on my back stands up on certain words. And consequences to me goes with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is consequences and rewards and all that. Mm-hmm. And my work is with emotions, on trying to figure out the whys of you do something in the first place, not the behaviors. So I think, jails are because you did a bad behavior and we're going to put you in jail, and that's your consequence. And if you're good, we'll let you out on 2/3 of your sentence, and that's your reward. Does it help? No, because a lot of people go back to jail. I believe that I'll treat you like I want you to treat me, and I'll let you know what'll happen if you don't follow how we run things here. But no, I don't give you a whole bunch of things that you're going to forget. And as a matter of fact, you don't get an appointment to come here, because if you don't make your appointment at 11 o'clock, that's not a good thing in most organizations. So we try to meet you where you're at. People know that I find a needle here, you're going to really see me get angry, because that's disrespectful for the guy sitting beside you that is here for recovery to get well. And I think that's the whole point of our approach, is to take somebody from an addiction to recovery to wellness. And in order for them then to come and help somebody at the door past recovery to wellness, so that the community itself starts healing itself. And I think that's what we have to do. No, I don't think that again, it goes back to semantics, that if we think that we have wraparound services, and I think this is all government's fault, that, they create, whoever creates a model, because you know what? I know everybody hates Justin Trudeau. I don't even really care about politics. I like you. But, this isn't just happened in Trudeau's era. Maybe he's made it worse. Maybe the policies and that coming out from Health Canada, which is a government all on its own. What's happened is there's no watchdogs. There's nobody watching over all these organizations that are getting all of this money. Who's watching that? And how is success measured? It's measured by, I had 500 visits this year. It isn't measured by, I saw how many people. It's visits. So John could have been here 2,000 times this year. The measurements of success in order to get funding is a problem in itself as well. And so how the whole system has been set up, probably since, poverty and homelessness was part of platforms for politicians. All of these events as a result of people not doing well in their life becomes a platform, right? It becomes a platform. Homelessness has been a platform. Poverty's been a platform. Children's food's been a platform for many, many decades. And so we can have many platforms, and you and I can have many, many discussions. And I've had many interviews by papers for the last 20 years, and I'll always say, you and I will, talk this very same thing in 10 more years, but we'll be talking about a new drug, or we'll be talking about a new situation. No government has created solutions. If you want to open 5,000 treatment facilities in this country right now, and you continue using an outdated model in those treatment facilities, then you're wasting your time in all those facilities, because people go to treatment right now and they come back and they take the pill that's in their top drawer for a celebration because they're just home from treatment. So just by saying we're going to open all of these treatment facilities and all of that, then it's time to call different experts to the table. And it's time to look at outdated models that aren't working. And it's time to start collecting data properly. If you want to write a research project, start collecting data on what success is. Because success isn't sending 500 people to that treatment facility and only 60% are successful at the end. If you have a proper, and I will challenge anybody that once we open a residential treatment facility, we will have at least 75 to 80% success, which is what we even have success right now on what we're doing. So like having treatment facilities is no different than building more prisons. If you're not doing the proper care on those people and aftercare when they come back to their community, then let's stop the discussion. Like, let's stop the politicizing people's lives and start helping them. I think that's where we need to start.
I think you hit a nail on the head, right? I think so many things have good ideas, but the execution is all wrong. And I think there's ingredients to success, and one of them you've been very successful at throughout your career, which is you've put food and eating together and community at kind of like the core, right? There's this great saying, connection is the antidote to addiction, right?
Well, we all want a sense of belonging. What happens with an addict is they've done so many terrible things. I mean, it just depends on how you define terrible, but most often have stole for their loved ones, lied to their loved ones, just gone to treatment because they're sick and tired of their loved ones yelling at them. And so they don't really, a lot of people don't have anybody left. So when you can embrace them and give them hope and give them tools so that they can cope with why they're an addict in the first place, and embrace them and build community on what we're trying to do here, or what we are doing here, I don't think we're trying, then you know what? They want to be part of your community, part of your family. And so when you embrace people to be part of it, and when they fall down because, you know, that good old word relapse, that's another one of my words that I don't like. But when something that happens in their life that they're not coping again and they use again, and then we lift them back up and we don't say, why did you do that? We try to figure out what happened in your life for you to use, and then work around why they wouldn't use again when that happens again. That's building community. And you know what? In addiction, we all know that it's just not the addict in the funding being wasted. I'm not saying the addiction's wasted. It might be. Is there's no community there. It's just, here's a needle, here's a pipe, here's a needle. Oh, now a social worker, here's a needle. So that when you hear these people that are in these positions of education, now that becomes wraparound service, right? And so there's no community being built. All is you're the user, we're the expert, you're the user. You're never part of our circle. I'm not, if you're an addict and you're in my program, I'm learning just as much from you as you are from me. Because all as I am is a tool provider.
Right.
And you're going to take them to use in your life where you need them. And you might go off from here and use for another year, but you know why you're using now. And so that in a year you might be sick of it and start using the tools that I give you. And I'm not saying that's the majority that happens.
Yeah.
But we need to give people the tools to uncover what they're carrying. Because my sexual assault could affect me. It affects me in certain ways. And you not being invited to a birthday party, and I'm not comparing here,
Right.
has impacts on your life as well.
Right.
It's not the event, it's how it's impacted my life. And then how those impacts and how I deal with them affects other people's lives. So then it becomes this cycle then, because I don't even know I'm giving off impacts that are affecting my children and so forth. And so you see that with addiction where, you know, they lose everything. and then they might go to prison. Women are particularly an interesting group to look at, maybe because I'm a woman, but I'm an addict. If I go to treatment, it might be reported. Now my children are taken away by Children's Aid. I have housing. I have Ontario Disability or Ontario Works or whatever. Because I get more because I have those children. Now those children are removed from Children's Aid. Now I lose my housing, I lose my money coming in, and I need to go to treatment. Now I go to treatment, but now I have to give my hair follicles to prove to get my kids back that I'm clean, but I don't have housing and I'm on the list again. So a lot of people won't come for treatment because of all of these hurdles if somebody finds out that I'm using.
Oh, I think that's a big, big, big problem. We do not include the family and friends in the healing process. No. And it's right now, the way the system is set up, because there is nowhere for anybody to go, you go into the ER, it becomes this carousel merry-go-round. And it's like, here's a pamphlet, go home and help your loved one detox. And like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, right? And so there's nothing in place to help the family and friends, A, understand why their loved one is an addict, or B, how to help them break free from that. But there is a whole funded group of people that if you just keep giving them the thing that's making them sick, it's going to be okay.
Well, yeah, and it's call whatever the number is now to call, and then if it depends on the wording that you give on the phone, and then they'll say, okay, you should go to the hospital. In the hospital, you're 6 hours out, so you might as well just, in education, like, I always tell people, I smoked for a lot of years, and, I'd worked in the operating room. I'd hold on to a cancerous lung, put it in a jar and go out for a smoke. You talk about education. That's pretty close to the highest education you can get.
Yeah.
Cancerous lung, jar, smoke. None of them really go together. But as humans, we think we're invincible. So I can go down the street and nobody's going to harm me. And then I'm surprised because I got beat up. So we have this invincibility or something. And I think, if I take fentanyl and I know how many of my friends have died, it doesn't stop me from taking fentanyl. I'm chasing after whoever sold that fentanyl because it's so strong now, right? So it's this invincibility or something. But then I had a dream that I had to say goodbye to my grandson on my deathbed, and I couldn't do it. So I woke up in the morning thinking, who the hell sent me the dream? And I quit smoking just like that because I knew that I'd have to say goodbye to the people I loved. That was an education. Somebody sent it. And so it's this whole mentality. Let's educate everybody. People, the families, most of them feel guilty that they did something and that's why their children are addicts. So those families need a circle to come to that you did the best you could. And in that part, not here's a pamphlet about addiction. You send Joe away for addiction and they teach them about the drug, and they're feeding so much about the drug because that's all they're talking about.
We have a lot of work to do, Peggy, and I think your time is now. I believe timing is everything. Like, society has to be ready. And I think what we've done is a failed experiment across this country. I think we tried something, and I think the results live on the street right now. And I think it's bad. It's really bad. And I think it's actually the intersection of public safety for everyone involved. The person who's battling addiction is not safe for themselves because they're injecting poison into themselves every day. The family and friends are having public safety crises. The business owners who are trying to just operate their business but have to close their door because nobody wants to come downtown. And the families that just want to go for a walk but they find a body on a trail because somebody's overdosing. This is a public safety issue, crisis, and I feel like crisis is just overused beyond words. And I feel like, back to your focus on the solution, not the problem. And I asked this question to the 360, so I'm going to ask you. If I gave you all the money in the world, which, by the way, you've been shut out repeatedly by federal money, but if I gave you all the money in the world and a magic wand, what would you do?
Well, I'd create a center because the center is the most important thing to do. And have different modalities. So, it would be the Redpath Wellness Center. We would have outpatient for those that don't need high-end level addiction treatment. There would be also an addiction treatment residential beds, and then there would be transitional beds, because that is one of the biggest things, and that, you know, you would have other sort of healers there as well. So, you know, here we have Reiki, we have massage, you know, we have Indigenous drummers, we have a variety of other things that can happen. We do journaling. So, you know, somebody might go through our program more than once because they like to do that. And then you take them then and you teach them, okay, this has been the problem, let's journal it, and let's see how you're dealing with that right now. And so it's a continuous, because the program's really about you coping with life once you get past a certain thing, more so than, addiction treatment, or, you know, the court sometimes will send us people that are in front of the courts with a domestic violence or whatever. Putting somebody in prison, like I've worked in prisons for 20 years, isn't resolving the problem. Federal prisons don't have proper programming. I worked in them. And so I can bring a guy or a woman here and deal with the underlying issues, what created that, and then they're great. We see them change their whole life because of that, and then want to be part of it. And so that's why you need like several things. We have people that come here that now come and help us make coffee for events and do things like that, that eventually I could hire as somebody that will run a program. Like, you know, I think that's why AA, I'm not saying I agree 100% with the model, but I agree with, they don't ask for government help. They keep running. They create community, and they don't give up, you know, and so it is that building the community, and it is, how do we create something that's sustainable? How do we create something that our communities give into in order to be replenished? Like, I'm sure half of the businesses in the city will give money if they knew that we could create something and that they wanted to be part of, because it isn't just those people and us. It's, we need to heal our whole community. That business person is suffering.
Sure.
Those children are suffering without a parent. You know, the families are suffering. The medical, like, staff. You can't tell me, and somebody that I worked in Emerge for several years, and I've, you know, seen that person, that adolescent on the table that we're working on with the noose still around their neck because they were cut out of a tree. And I still see that many years later when I close my eyes, not often. But we were not put on this earth to be always on our toes, ready to revive somebody. And what we're going to produce is frontline workers that have a new form of PTSD, or whatever you want to call it in the DSM, that are going to be in a lot of trouble. And so we continue focusing on that drug. Let's do some history. 1890, we had high-end women hooked on cocaine, and Bayer came along that produced aspirin and created heroin so that maybe they could get them off the cocaine. We've been chasing our tail since 1890. You saw the states forever, the war on drugs, that are, who knows what part they're in it. And so you got pharmaceutical companies sponsoring politicians, and you have the same company that produced OxyContin now producing Dilaudid. So they produced the problem and now they're part of the solution. Where, let's follow the money. And I'm not into, I don't give a shit about government. I really don't. Yes. And you know what? I like, you know, I love you.
You just explained the government.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, it's all about money. And so,
yep, it is.
Nobody can say I'm doing this for money, because I'm not, you know, but we have to stop. This isn't new. It's just become larger, and it's visible. There's always been people in tents. They were out on the Parkway before, like commercializing and like the changing and all of the stuff that created on the Parkway. We've always had people in tents, and we've always watched out for them to make sure they're all right. So this tent stuff is not new. It's just got way bigger. And why did it get way bigger? Because it could. And there's been no rules around what's happening. You want some crack pipes? Here's a box. Like, we got a dealer on this side of the fence that's selling illegal drugs. A consumption site can only be open if there's illegal drugs being sold to the people going into it. Unless you're getting safe supply and that's what you're coming with, and maybe some are, but then you have to worry about dilaudid were never produced to inject. So that again is a problem. The things that we're using were not meant for what they're being used for. So that's where the problems are. There's also a problem now that we started something that we can't just stop it. And so what is the strategy then of the government on how they're going to resolve this? Don't just tell me you're going to open a whole bunch of treatment facilities and do the same old, because that's no difference from 1890.
Agreed with you, Peggy. It took us years to get here. It's going to take us years to get out. But I do think identifying the problem leads you to this solution. And I think you've identified it really, really, really clearly in what you just said. And I think we don't have, anyway, I could go on about this. We don't really even have healthcare. We have sick care, right? Everything's intervention. There's very few prevention things and helping these kids, etc. I want to leave people with something to think about. Because the stat right now is 22 people a day are dying of overdoses. And I think that stat is actually in Canada. And I think that stat is super misleading because that number doesn't include the amount of people who die as a result of complications to the infection. That number doesn't account for the number of people who are dying from suicide because they can't handle it, or the friends or the family or the jobs lost. That number is so small, in my opinion, to the actual number of what's happening as a result of drugs. But you have such hope. Hope is the thing that I believe, it's the glue that keeps us together when we think we can't go on, right? It's that one story of the success. Well, if that can happen to that person, if I can see myself in that person, I want you to leave us with one story of great success, of somebody who was a write-off by society's terms and is now living.
Wow, I don't know which one I'd pull down, but yeah, I've had many people come here that were in gangs in the city, that were in jail. We see many alcoholics as well. Alcohol is doing maybe not just as much, but is also a big problem with inner city. It has been forever. But I think that the person that I would think that I'm very proud of, is in front of the courts. They wanted to give this person 6 years for the crime. I'm fighting in the courts that I think that he's come so far. He comes here. Eventually, I will hire him in order for him to go to the very people he used to sell drugs to bring here for help. And so nobody would have ever thought when he walked through our doors a year and a half ago that I'd be telling this story. And, taking somebody that's probably been selling drugs for 30 years off the street from selling drugs to recovery, and I think almost to wellness. He would be one that is a great one. Another one that I'll say really quickly is a person that isn't even in Peterborough, that just recently, she's from a First Nation community in British Columbia, that just recently sent me an email thanking me for saving her life, her family's life, and her community's life, and is currently ready to, she's written a book about it, about her journey through it, and is going to hopefully in the next 2 months publish it. What would be wonderful is to be able to fly out there and surprise her. I've never met her. We train people in the Friendship Center there to run the program, and to get stories like that. We have men in Quebec that go there that have domestic assaults or whatever in front of the courts, and they go to a lodge in Quebec in a First Nation community, and they go through my program there and have great success. They have my feather, like in Redpath on the side of the building. A lot of people have tattoos of Redpath. These are people I've never met. They're just people that we've trained, facilitators in their area or their organization to run our program. So although we're so successful here, and I think we're probably even more successful here because I developed and my staff have been part of the development. So we can change it and turn it where other people can do that across the country.
Well, I think the biggest thing one of the biggest things I hear from you today is this is not universal. Each person, just like their own genetic makeup, is unique. as will be their experience and their journey to break free from addiction or whatever issues that they're dealing with. I think you have a camera here. I would love you to look at that camera because there's people watching right now. And I'm telling you, Peggy, this, you know this, I know this because you deal with a lot of this. They're hanging on by a thread. Like they don't see tomorrow. And they can't even see tonight. And you know what's possible. You've seen it. And they're listening to you. And I would love you to look at that camera and tell them.
Well, I think, you know, I think there's hope for everyone that, you know, come here to Right to Heal, start the journey. People, you know, always thank me for being real. I moved drugs for the Satan's Choice many years ago as a teenager. I've been on the street. I know the poverty, and I know that we have a part of the solution. So I know that that isn't a way of life that everybody has to live, and that there is hope, that there is a new way. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes I don't think it might seem real, but I think there is love for everyone, and I think love is here.
Peggy Shaughnessy, we did a whole interview without a swear word.
I know. I did? Yeah. Oh, did I say fuck? Shit. Oh, shit. Oh.
Listen, I really wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One, people need to know you're here. People need to know that we don't have to keep doing the same thing. People need to know that there are people. I never believe in reinventing the wheel. I just don't. It just seems obscene to me because you have answers. People have answers. You also treat the why. You also have the lived experience. You have the compassion, and you have that line of you expect more from people. And when you expect more from people, guess what you get?
Respect.
You get more.
Yeah. But you don't get entitlement. And you get respect.
So Peggy, we're gonna keep this going. We're gonna keep educating people, even though I know we're not educating, but it's that conversation starter. And I think we tried something. I think people with good intentions tried something in this country. And I think it's time we start to row in a different direction together. And I believe this, and I say this all the time. If we can fix it in Peterborough, we can fix it in Canada.
In the world.
Agreed.
And I think your new word could be awareness.
Okay. I like it.
I do too.
I always said education equals awareness equals change.
So we can slash education and put awareness, slash relapse, because it's a choice that you've made. It isn't a relapse.
Anything mentionable is manageable. Fred Rogers, right?
We had a guy that one time said that he fell off the wagon, and my staff said, "You jumped off the fucking wagon. You didn't fall off it. You jumped off it." So
that's why discipline is so important, right?
Yeah. I think hope maybe even goes before discipline. I think that determination, maybe my tattoo's the story of that I read today of transformation, and it's the last story of the program, and it is about this mouse's transformation, but it's also all their lives as well. And like I said, if we can give people the proper tools, you'll see the transformation.
And a hand up, not a hand out, right? Everybody needs help at different times in their life. And then it always seems to come full circle, right?
So for sure.
You get what you give.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thanks.